Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi, I'm Alex Smith. I'm just outside Philadelphia in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and I'm the executive director at an early childhood center.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Really excited to have wonderful Harvard friends from our cohort share their story and really get us all inspired about the work that you do and the various communities and students and individuals that you impact on a day-to-day basis. I know that you've had quite the experience as a teacher and educator. You mentioned early childhood, so we're talking the little ones and yeah, the littles. And I'm excited to learn more about that since, I've taught across grade levels myself, but have not taught the littlest of them, like from kindergarten and down. I think the earliest for me was first grade. And that was already a lot.
Yeah,
So,
it's a whole new world.
you are a different, yes, it's a whole new world and you're different breed of teacher, to be able to step into that space and really not only navigate it, but create the kind of like learning environments where kids are able to be themselves, be able to discover new things, build skills, make friends, make memories, so much. I can't wait to hear more about that. And so wanted to pass it back to you to share how did you find yourself to do this work in early childhood education, and what were some of the main influences in your journey as a teacher?
So I actually stumbled into it. I needed a part-time job while I was doing some college, and I was going through ads online, and I saw that someone needed a toddler teacher for 2-year-olds of all things. And I was like, I could do that. He could sit and play all day. Who's not playing all day, Scott? So I fell into it. I was in the classroom with these kids part-time, and we would go in the morning, and it was exhausting. But I fell in love with it immediately because there was so much energy, and no 2 days are ever the same. I did 2-year-olds for the 2-year-old classroom for probably a year and a half. And then I got to move up to the preschool, which seemed like a college level compared to 2-year-olds. And we were actually doing like lesson planning and stuff like that with those kids. Not that you don't do that with the 2-year-olds, but it's more intense when you get to a preschool classroom. So yeah, preschool was where I stayed for, oh gosh, 20 years. Back when I started, you didn't really need a degree to teach early childhood education. You had to have some experience with kids, and they threw you into the classroom and they were like, good luck with that. And the longer I was in the field, the more people started to see that we really needed to have educated people doing this work. Everybody brags about how it's, the foundation of all this learning, but early childhood educators are kind of left behind, I feel like, or forgotten a lot. A lot of our staff live in poverty because we're not paid as well as regular teachers are. So yeah, preschool for 20 some years. It came to the point where I needed to have a bachelor's degree to continue teaching preschool. So I did that. I got my degree through Purdue's online education platform. So Purdue Global University. I got my degree in early childhood and admin. So I was able to stay in the classroom with that. And I knew that eventually I was going to want to go on to lead. So the admin part really intrigued me. I got my teaching certification through Pennsylvania, and I taught pre-K Counts, which is a state-funded program here in Pennsylvania, where they really target kids that are at high risk for educational issues. We serve impoverished communities, families that aren't quite, they need help. So that's the families we serve. And I did that for 4 years. It was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The families they're incredibly grateful, and they're ready and they're eager for their kids to be something more than they were. I think that part of it intrigued me because I grew up in a rural part of Western New York, so just south of Buffalo. And the community that I grew up in, we were poor. I didn't realize this until I was older, but our family didn't have a lot. We always just thought my mom was mean when she wouldn't stop at McDonald's, but turns out later years we found out that she just couldn't afford even Happy Meals for my sister and I. So I wanted to be part of that community because I wanted to show those families and those kids that you can pull yourself out of this, and you can be an achiever and you can do something that you really want to do. So I loved my stint in that. Uh, my PA teaching cert we had to get in order to get to a level 2, which is a lifetime certification. They ask you to either get a master's degree or they ask you to take these courses at a school district, which just really didn't interest me. So I told my wife one day, I said, I'm going to apply to Harvard to get my master's degree. And she looked at me and she was like, uh-huh, yeah, sure, yeah, okay. So I applied. It was the only school I applied to get my master's degree credentials. And in March, when we all got our letters, she was sound asleep on the couch. It was 8 o'clock at night, and I got the letter. And I sat there quietly for a minute because I was like, how am I going to handle this rejection? Like, I'm sure we all went through that, you know? I was like, what am I going to do when this says no? I'm going to be okay. And so I'm talking to myself and I was like, just open it. So I opened it and the confetti was there. And I literally jumped up and knocked her onto the floor. And I was yelling, oh my God, oh my God. And she thought something happened to one of our kids. And she's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I started crying. And she's like, what is happening? And so I showed her the letter. And so we just spent the whole night, like we stayed up until I think it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning, just talking about what an amazing opportunity this was going to be and how this was going to impact my career and my kids and my family and everything else. So it's been an interesting journey to get from where I came from to where I am today, and I'm excited about it.
Wow, thank you so much, Alex. And I'm very excited also about kind of not only where you've been, right, what you shared, but also where you're moving towards.
Mhm.
And it's just so evident, like that you found your niche, right, with early childhood education, and that regardless of like what society kind of thinks of that particular profession, and the lack of maybe like support or like yeah, kind of
Yeah.
yeah, the support side of it, it's just really baffling because, like you said, right, everyone says that that is the foundation and that's so important, right,
Mhm.
developmentally, so many big strides. But yeah, your commitment to stay in that field and, really kind of shift that narrative and like persist with making your impact is so inspiring.
Mhm.
And, you mentioned about in this at the start, you stumbled into this job and it was shocking but at the same time electrifying because of the energy that you spoke about.
Yeah.
And ever since, it seems like you haven't really looked back
No.
in terms of, why you do the work that you do. So I wanted to kind of like rewind the clock a little bit and really focus on that part-time job because it sounds like there was a lot going on. And I know that for myself, some of like the early experiences in the classroom were the most terrifying.
Mhm.
And, so much self-doubt and, I don't know if I'm doing this right. Maybe I'm scarring this child because I have no idea what's going on. But yeah, like, could you maybe like speak to a particular like anecdote that happened that really stayed with you in those early years,
Yeah.
or maybe it was like day one. What was that like? Because you didn't really know what you were getting yourself into.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. There were I think there were 9 kids in that initial classroom that I was in, and there was one other teacher in there with me, and I honestly, like, I expected it to be like a play date, like, I had, friends who had babies and little kids like that, and I thought, "Oh, we're just gonna hang out all day," but it's not what it was actually they were teaching these kids things, and activities were structured, and I had no idea that that was even a thing. Um, but it's also these kids are also all over the place because they're not all at the same level at 2, so you've got some that are speaking really well, and you've got some that are still babbling. So it was a challenge to figure out what each kid needed and how we were going to provide that. So individualization was day one. Like you got to figure out who's getting what and what they need. But the kids were always great because even when they're in the throes of chucking crayons at one another, they'll stop for a second and they'll come over and they'll curl up in your lap and they'll just want to have that moment where they want to just connect and they just want to be for a second. So I think it was that constant like up and down throughout the day that I really appreciated because you don't get bored. I did a stint in kindergarten. I did kindergarten enrichment, and it was great. I loved it because the kids were learning stuff, but every day started to become the same thing. We were doing math and then we were doing English, whereas in the 2-year-old classrooms and younger, you can plan a day if you want to, but you're not guaranteed that that's what's going to happen throughout the day because the kids are coming in and they're wanting their own thing or they're not interested in what you want to say. So I really appreciate that not really having a plan. It's fly by the seat of your pants every day sometimes I feel like, and I appreciate that. I work best in chaos, I guess. And that's a good environment to be in if that's where your niche is. So yeah, but the kids, we fell in love with the kids. I mean, we would help the parents out. We did babysitting after school for some of them sometimes, and we became really close with the families. And I think that's something else that teachers who work in K through 12, they don't get to have that. Like we have a very close relationship with our parents because we're helping parent their children every day. We got to see things they didn't. Sometimes we were seeing first steps, or we were seeing the first time they would write their name. So being able to share that with families, it created this bond. So I think also having an appreciation for, relationship building in those early years is really important as well for me, because connecting with the families it's rewarding for me. So I enjoyed that as well.
Definitely. Yeah, the connection part of it is huge.
Yeah.
And I love how you expressed like the roller coaster nature of like,
Mhm.
you could plan out the day, but then something totally unexpected happens, or, the excitement of one thing just
Mhm.
overrides everything else.
Yeah.
And you really, it's just kind of have to like be like really attuned to whatever the needs of that individual student are. And I think, wouldn't it be great if like all of education, moving from, you know, preschool all the way up into college was like that? That would be nice, right?
And you learn the things that interest the kids. Like I always made a point to we would start talking at the end of early fall about like how magical the first snow is, and how Frosty the Snowman came to life with magical snow. So we would watch for those days, and the very first snow, we would be watching out the window, and we would stop everything that we were doing, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, the first snow is happening. And like they get excited off in your energy, so now everybody's off at circle time, and they're out and we're looking out the window. So now we just spend 15-20 minutes talking about that, and you wait for them to get built up, and you're like, let's get our coats and go outside and play in this. And that's
Oh,
something you can't do in K through 12.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't just abandon your day to go and do something that really is pulling towards them. So it's
Mm.
little things like that that I love doing.
Yeah, the spontaneity of it sounds
Hmm.
so much fun. And it just like vibes with like, I think the authentic way that kids are just always observing and like absorbing,
Yeah.
information from their environment. And when you are able to direct their attention towards something genuinely awesome, like the first snow,
Hmm.
they of course are going to get like pulled into that. And I think it's just so cool too that like everyone's able to like hold that kind of space and like put attention towards something that maybe to a lot of other people, right,
Hmm.
it's insignificant, or they've seen it before, but there's so little, this is their first time seeing it. So like, yeah, you're able to see like through their eyes
Yeah.
and feel that, right?
And it's funny because sometimes they'll lead you into things. Last year, I always made the kids were always helpers, so they always had jobs to help. And last year, two of my boys were helping me take trash out. And we went outside, they were cutting limbs off trees. And the boys were just fascinated with this. They're like, Mr. Alex, look at what he's climbing up that tree. He's going to cut that branch off. So we stopped and we went in and got the whole class. And we spent probably 30 minutes sitting outside on the steps just watching them cut these trees off. And so it becomes part of your unit of what you're doing. Now I see that you're interested in this. So how many branches have they cut down so far? So we're pulling into every moment has some kind of learning in it, but it's stuff that they're interested in. So they don't really realize that it's learning. It's fantastic. It makes me look good.
Well, I mean, because I think, kids like, all young people are like wired to learn.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've heard this as well, but sometimes like being a good teacher is just knowing when to get out of the way,
Yes.
so they can just go ahead and like, do that. But it really does take a certain, I think, wisdom is the word I would use as the teacher, to recognize, hey, this is an interest, and let's do everything we can to create a pathway towards that
Yeah.
and channel that interest. And then afterwards, you can always work kind of like, what is it? Yeah, you can always like kind of structure out new lessons that will then tie back to that new interest. But
Mhm.
that's kind of, I don't know, what I see a lot of times in like, just schools in general, especially when you get into the high school area, which is more of my background. Such disconnect, and like, why am I studying this, and what's the purpose of that? And oftentimes like there's no real effort made, I think, from the school's part to understand what their genuine interests are. It's always just kind of, this is what you got to do. This is the pathway moving forward. Go to college, right? That kind of thing.
Yep, I had a student teacher last year. She was scared to death the first day she came in, and her eyes were real wide, and she was sitting at circle time. And I went over and I sat next to her, and I said, "Are you all right?" And she was like, "I don't know what I'm doing." And I said, "None of us do." I said, "Just listen, and whatever it is that they're talking to you about, do that. So she was sitting with this kid and he was playing with blocks and he was like, I'm going to knock it over now. And she was like, don't do that. And I was like, let him do that. Now what happens next? So it was just a lesson for her on how learning was going to occur with these little kids, because I think she thought she was going to come in and she was going to have a math lesson with them. And it doesn't work when you're 3 and 4 years old. You know, they're not really interested in that too much. So it's been nice to watch the next generation coming in and realizing that that was me at one point in time, and now to be able to give them what I've learned. So it's been a journey.
I love that little story that you just shared, that piece of like mentorship, right? For like newer educators, right? That have maybe similar, maybe even more anxieties of,
Yeah.
stepping into that classroom space. And I wonder, was there a teacher like that did the same thing that you just did for that younger teacher? Like, could you speak to a particular teacher that gave you really great reassurance or important feedback about what being a good teacher really entails?
Yeah. I was lucky that I had a lot of great teachers in my life growing up. I mean, we had a really small school district. And some people would say it probably wasn't worth much, but I had some fantastic teachers. I had a teacher in high school, my English teacher. Her name was Mary Ann. Bender was her last name, and she was fantastic. She recognized immediately that sarcasm was my love language, and so she and I connected in that. And she was going around the room one day, and she was asking something, and I had some smart aleck comment about something, and she stopped and she came over and she sat down and next to me, and she put her hand on my shoulder and she was patting me. She said, you'd be really dangerous if you'd use just 30% of your brain." And I just looked at her. I was like, "You can't say that to me." And she's like, "But I did," and just walked away from me. But she was always like, she knew that I loved reading, and so she would always push. She would come over and just set a book down on my desk, and I'd be like, "Is this extra homework?" She's like, "If you need it to be, just read the book." So she pushed me outside of my comfort zone, and she made me love language and reading and all those things that I could find and I could escape within it. I think she recognized that sometimes I needed that. So she was fantastic. I had another teacher, Rourke Charlo. He was a photography teacher. He would just sit and talk to me. Like, I would stay after class and we would just sit and talk, not about school, just about life and stuff like that. And I think teachers nowadays are afraid to have those kinds of relationships because you have to be very careful with that. But he was fantastic about just sitting and chatting with me and letting me be there and decompress when I needed it. And I think that's important for kids. So yeah, I had a lot of great teachers.
Thank you for sharing those great teachers of yours. And it what sounds like is the common denominator for both of them is that they really cared about you, right? They
Mhm.
took interest in your development.
Yep.
They wanted to spend time with you. There's this like wonderful phrase that I've heard is that attention, and I don't know who this is attributed to, but they say attention is the purest form of generosity.
Yep.
So I think in a profession that demands so much of you,
Mhm.
when it comes to like, yeah, lesson planning, grading, putting in the hours,
Yeah.
right, doing all the correspondence with the families, et cetera, and yet also finding time
Mhm.
to support newer teachers, I think that's incredible, right? It speaks to, um, their own understanding of like this is important, right? Yeah, we're here for the students, yes, but we also need to be here for one another, and I think that speaks to a wider culture of just what the school community can be, right, for everyone,
Mhm.
not just for the students. Is that something that you kind of continue on as like a maybe a bit of like a philosophy as you find yourself in new leadership roles and it's a brand new school that you're supporting in its development,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. I think that when I started to do our hiring, I intentionally hired young teachers. They're both in their 20s. One's just out of college. I want to make sure that I'm giving what I have to the next generation of teachers. A parent came in to do a tour, and our infant teacher, she's 23. She's got experience in the baby room. She's fantastic. I would leave her with my kids, and she was like, she's so young. Like, yes, that's what we need. We need the next generation coming in. I mean, I can hire Grandma Hilda to come in here and sit on the floor with your baby, but this teacher has something else to give. She's young and she's thirsty and she wants that. So I'm intentionally hiring a younger generation of teachers so that I can mentor them through and they can become the next great thing, I hope. Um, I was also lucky enough when you were just speaking about having teachers who took the time. I had great examples. My parents were great examples of how important education was. My mom was a teen mom. She got pregnant with me when she was a senior in high school. And she struggled. She worked 2 and 3 meaningless jobs sometimes to take care of us. And when my sister came around, it was even harder. But my mom hustled her entire life working those jobs, and she put herself through nursing school. She started out as a CNA and then an LPN. She became an RN. Eventually, she went on to get her bachelor's degree in nursing. And by the time I was in college, she was teaching nursing courses. So she was a living example of how important this was. My dad dropped out of school when he was in 8th grade. My stepdad, he raised us, so he's my dad. Um, he dropped out in 8th grade, and he was a contractor. He built the most beautiful things, Scott. He could build a house and he could put anything together that you wanted to, but the man could not spell for the life of him. I can remember my mom sitting at the table with him writing up contracts because he just struggled with this. And when my stepbrother was graduating high school, my dad said to my mom, he said, I want to be a high school graduate. And she was like, well, then be a high school graduate. Go and do it. So he called the school and they were like, yes, we can set you up with a GED program. And he said, no. He said, I want to graduate high school. He took 2 years of his life to go back to high school and get a high school diploma. And so they were living examples of, if there's something that's important to you, do it. Find a way to make it work and do it. And graduating, they both passed. I've been without them for years now. But graduating Harvard, I feel like they would have been in the front row cheering the loudest, because it's something that, they did it on their own and I did it on my own as well. And it's just, I wanted to pay that forward because that example from them was so important to me. I want my kids, and not just my kids that belong to me, but my kids that I teach, they're my kids too. I want them to see that education is important, because it can take you places. And that's what my mom always showed us. She's like, if you get an education, tomorrow's going to be a better day. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that about both of them.
That's amazing. I'm like
Yeah.
kind of getting a little teary eyed. Yeah, no, I already love both of your parents,
Yeah.
and I think that's so special. I love what you said about if there's something important to you,
Mm-hmm.
then do it. Don't overcomplicate it. I mean, that's my commentary. Don't overcomplicate it.
Oh,
Just, it's like the attitude, the can-do attitude, but then knowing that, like, through that like hard work and like focus, rallying people, right, your support system around you,
yep.
you only need that one person,
Yep.
really to like give you that encouragement that, persevering, you'll accomplish
Yeah.
things beyond your wildest dreams. And what is like your goal doesn't have to be the same as like the person next to you or the person across the country or
Mm-hmm.
all this, right? I mean, even just like the high school diploma and like following through with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sense of like, I'm sure like elation and pride that like job well done, you did
Yep.
it. I think that's so amazing. And also my mom is also an RN, and has her own journey of
Yeah.
really struggling, not knowing, English very well since she's a Korean immigrant,
Okay.
and just being like, how am I going to get through these studies? I can barely write, a full paragraph,
Yeah.
let alone essays.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just like, I think we need these models in our lives, to show us that, yeah, life is difficult and, achieving that goal can be hard. But it's never impossible. Yeah. And then this one other, oh, sorry. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Isn't it funny, Scott, how we both come from, like, everybody all the women in my family are nurses. They're all medical backgrounds. Isn't it funny how we come from a line of givers and caretakers, and we found another path to do that in? Like,
Yeah. I think about that too.
same but different. But yeah, I just, so you said that just now. I'd never really thought about that, but yeah, it's the same but different.
Yeah, I think about this in terms of like nursing, and I don't even fully. I mean, like I've heard like a lot of table conversations. Both my sister and my mom both work as nurses,
Yep.
and so I hear it a lot, and there's just a lot of stuff they have to put up with,
Yeah.
and oftentimes like it's thankless work.
Yep.
It's not glorious, right? Cleaning someone's butt is not a glorious thing.
No.
But when it's like, human dignity that we're talking about, when it's about, their life, right? And what that imparts on their families and how important that
Mm-hmm.
is literally life or death.
Yeah.
I realize, wow, what could be more important than that? And then how that ties into the work that we do as educators. Again, it's life. we're working with people's lives here,
Yep.
their futures, and it also requires the same level of like humility and patience and effort,
Yeah.
so that we can connect, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so much.
Yeah, so much patience. Yeah. My mom, she fed I'm a medical junkie, so all things medical I love. I love hearing about it. I love learning about it. So she would feed
Mm.
that. She worked 3 to 11, so we didn't see her all that often. By the time we got home from school and she got home from work, we were in bed. So on her days off, she would come over with, mac and cheese or whatever she was cooking for dinner, and she'd be like, "You should see the abscess I helped drain today." Like, these are just normal dinner conversations that we would have, because she knew that I liked that kind of stuff, so that she would throw it out there just so that we could have that connection. And I'm sure that you had many of those conversations with your mom as well. And
Yeah. Sometimes they were very sad conversations
yeah,
too,
hmm
right? In
she was,
terms of like
yeah,
someone didn't make it,
life is,
right? Family,
hmm
right?
yeah.
I'm surprised that you didn't go down the nursing pathway. Because
Well,
my mom encouraged me to become a nurse. Actually, she was like, "You should do that," and then I was like, rebellious, teenage version of Scott is like, "No, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna go to a liberal arts college and figure it out."
I'm gonna do basket weaving. Leave me alone. No, I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to be a doctor, but there was just, I mean, the way that we grew up, that wasn't going to happen. I knew that that wasn't going to be in the cards. It was expensive, and there was no way that was going to happen. So, and I didn't. I'd heard enough of mom's nursing stories that I wasn't interested in that. So my dad was always like, "You got to find something that can pay the bills," because in high school, he was like, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to do?" And I was like, "I'm going to be a photographer." And he's like, "Well, you're going to be hungry all the time." Like, he
He's
was
still honest.
very much about make sure you can support yourself. So I decided photography probably wasn't going to work out because dad wasn't going to be buying dinner anymore, I guess. So, but yeah, they were always pushing me to do what I wanted to do to make sure that you can take care of yourself in the process of it, because unfortunately there's not a lot of people that are going to take care of you. Like, sometimes you got to be self-sufficient. So
And well, yeah, that's so true, right? The job is very important, and yeah, the salary part of it, I understand that. But taking care of yourself, right, through the job is one thing, right? Sometimes people go into a profession simply with that as their metric, and they just want to have enough to enjoy. I don't know, maybe they get a nice car, maybe, they go on some vacations, and that's that. But, I've also heard that people go into teaching, as if it's their like vocation, right? That like this is my mission. And I'm sure there's like an in between. There's a middle ground between there as well.
yeah,
Um and I'm okay, so there was something that you said a little while back that like really, really struck me, and I just wanted to like raise this because you said it so naturally, but I don't know if you realize this, or maybe you do, but I just want you to know that I'm in awe of like what you said about you treat your own kids, right, your students, as if they were your kids,
yeah,
right? So you said that in some effect,
mm,
and I think people don't realize like that's a genuine feeling that I think we have of like taking care of,
yeah,
that we're entrusted by these families
hmm
to take care of their children,
yep,
to educate them, to inspire them,
hmm
to show them that concern and care. But like yeah, there's something really profound about that, and I just wanted to let you know that that really resonated with me. And I wonder, like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's especially true in early childhood. Like, I can't speak to I can't speak to your aspect of teaching high school because I don't know what that's like. But when someone brings me their 3-year-old and I have them for 2 years, sometimes I spend more time with that kid than their parents do. And sometimes I'm getting a kid who doesn't have a dad at home or who doesn't have a mom at home. So I think sometimes there's also, we end up being fill-ins. So we're taking what mom brings us for the day, and it's been a rough day at home, or it's been a rough weekend. Maybe the kids haven't eaten because they're struggling at home, so they come to us, and now we're acting sometimes as not just a teacher, but we're parenting as well. We're giving them the things that they need. And I've built lifelong relationships with some of these kids. I just had one of my kids from last year. He's a ruffian. And his dad messaged me. He's like, "You're not going to believe what happens." And he sends me an X-ray. The kid was playing football and broke his leg. So there's constant, they're going to be in my life for life. You know what I mean? Like, they're there, and they're celebrating with me, and I'm celebrating with them. But there's a connection that I think that we have as early childhood educators, that people that teach older grades don't necessarily get, because we're helping raise kids sometimes, and not just in the fact of, you guys do a great job of instilling morals and stuff too, but we're literally teaching these little people how to be human beings. Like they come to us as blobs of goo, and we mold them the best we can, and we send them out. But we're instilling the things that are important to us as to them, just as much as their parents are. So I think it would feel different than teaching, a 12-year-old. I could never do that, by the way. But I think it's different, having them at such an early age. There's so much more to it, I feel like.
And there's just so like pure, right? I mean, it's the blob that you were talking about of clay,
Yeah.
and the the impact that you make, like every action, every word that you're saying is being registered in some capacity. So of course, I think there's like this feeling as like all educators, we want to do right by the families,
Yep.
but we also want to, I don't know, like yeah, recognize the fact that this is a lifelong kind of endeavor. Education's such a long term project, and it's wonderful when you're able to have those positive relationships formed
Hmm.
and maintain that, right? And have like, not maybe not like daily or, even monthly, but like
Yeah.
even like years later, right? Playing football,
Yeah.
maybe in high school, I imagine. And then they just reach out to you
Yeah.
and tell you that. And you can immediately say, yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like,
Yeah. That's
I
him.
don't know his name, but yeah, that's him, the ruffian.
Yeah, that's the ruffian. Yeah, I love it. There's kids now that I had when they were 4, and they're now graduating from college. God, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? But they're human beings now, like they're grown adults, and I can remember when they were potty training, and that was my job,
Mm.
is to make sure they were doing that. And now they're people now, and it's nice to know. And some of them still remember. They're like, "Oh, I remember you. You had the class where you made us bring the peanut butter cups in for you." And I'm like, "Yes, that was me." So, they
Mm.
remember these things from our classrooms, and it's you can't I don't think that you can teach early childhood education because you're in it for the money. Like you
Mm.
literally have to be in this because this is what you want to do. You're not going to be rich working in early childhood. You're just not. But there's so much more that I get from it than a paycheck every week. It's just it's hard to put into words.
Yeah, and it's really upsetting when you talk about a lot of teachers in preschool, early childhood education in general, that are living in poverty because of how low the salary is, and it just yeah, it's very baffling, right? I mean, because then you have on the other side, on the like college, and
Yeah.
where there's such kind of prestige and there's this sense that they deserve a certain salary amount, and it's the last stage before they go out into the quote unquote real world. And um what are your thoughts, because I'm sure you've thought a lot about this in terms of that discrepancy as to like why that might be the case.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things when I started this job, when I did my interviewing, I wanted to make sure that they understood that one of my non-negotiables was that our teachers were going to be paid above what the average salary is. Because I can't keep a teacher in my school if they can't feed their kids, or if they can't pay their bills. They're going to jump and they're going to go somewhere else. If you make more money at Chick-fil-A, you're going to go to Chick-fil-A and sling nuggets because it's easier than working in early childhood education, and it pays more. I had to do one of McCarthy's speeches that we had to do. We had to pick. I don't even remember what it was, but I picked early childhood teachers, and I was talking about it. When I was doing the research, I was baffled that in Pennsylvania, the average its salary for early childhood teacher was like $11 an hour. Like that's crazy to me that we expect them to come in and do this hard work, and this is a labor of love, and we're not paying them. The government wants to help. They do. They want to do something, but I don't think that they're capable of doing anything either. This year, the big thing in PA was like, we're going to give all of them $1,000 bonus, and I'm like, what is that going to do? Like, that's 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 what they make in a week, sir. So I don't know what the answer is. I know they need to do more, because if you're expecting that we're creating a foundation for education, and I can't keep people in there to create that foundation, you're going to have problems down the line. I mean, look at the issues that we have in schools with kids and behaviors and stuff. If we don't have qualified teachers in the classroom, we can't address those behaviors. We can't help those families. So I don't know what the answer is, Scott, but they need to figure it out right quick.
Well, I know that the immediate answer and what you're currently engaged with this new school and hiring younger teachers is to really empower them
Yeah.
and give them the confidence and create the model.
Mhm.
sounds like that's what you're doing. And I think having a model that is like shining example of this is a school that's doing it right. This is what should be replicated right across the nation. I can't help but think that's what's going to give hope
Yeah.
to building out maybe it's maybe the word is a movement, right, to really shift this in the right direction, and to bring more attention on just how critical this period is for human development,
Mhm.
and just like letting people know that this is a long-term project. Again, it's like you need to invest in young people, and you need to also invest in those who are taking care of and educating those
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah. Even little things like teachers qualify for student loan forgiveness. It's up to a certain point. Early childhood educators don't qualify for that. So, unless you work for a nonprofit organization for 10 years, you can apply for PSLF after the 10 years, but we don't get any kind of student. So, they're demanding these things. Like for me, they're like, oh, well, we need you to get a master's degree. But now I'm out all that money, and your salary that you're paying me isn't, it's not going to help with that. So there needs to be some balance, and they need to take a real look at policy and how they're doling out their money.
Hmm. Yeah. So many like different directions to take with that big issue, but I did want to kind of ask ask a different question, if that's okay. Go in a different direction. Because you said that, again, going back to when you initially started and you were kind of like, oh, wow, it's a lot harder than I had anticipated. And you were, in a sense, taking care of people's young children, right? 2-year-olds. Um, were at this point, did you have kids of your own? Because I know that you've had,
Yeah.
you have 4 children, right? Which is amazing. And I'm sure they're all equally incredible. But I'm just wondering, like, did doing this job as an early childhood educator help you to be a better parent as well? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So no, I was young. We didn't have kids yet. I don't even was I we just got married. Um, didn't have kids yet, and I think it did drive me to want to have kids of our own because there was so much. I love the energy, So I thought to myself, it will be great because I'll have this energy all day, and then I'll go home to it too. I think that it prepared me for parenthood because there were so many things that I got to see behind the scenes. Like I knew what to do for our kids. Um, my son, all four of our kids are adopted, by the way. So they were all babies when we brought them home. Jace, who's our oldest son, was the oldest when he came home at 6 months. Um, because I had worked in early childhood education, I recognized immediately that Jace had some quirks. And by the time he was almost 3, he'd been diagnosed with ASD. And I'd been fortunate enough to work in a classroom where we had special education kids who had been diagnosed with ASD as well. And I think that experience, I was able to translate that, and we were able to get Jace the things that he needed immediately. And it really helped him get his best foot forward in life and become successful. By the time he was in second or third grade, he was unidentified as a special education student. And he went on to be, the star of his basketball team in high school, and he led them to a championship. Like he did all these fantastic things. And if I had just been, working at a newspaper, taking pictures as a photographer, I don't know that we would have been able to give Jace that kind of hand up, So I think that, yeah, I think it prepared me a lot for the things that I didn't even know were coming down the pike for me. So yeah, I guess an education, right?
What a great story. I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm sure that that's, you're just citing one story with Jace, right?
Yeah.
But in so many other ways, like you were able to really really get to know your kids, and like not only like the connection piece, but also just in terms of like, yeah, what do they need and how can I bring them the right resources? And
Mhm.
and I think a lot of parents struggle with that. Maybe there's just such overwhelm, I think, just being thrust into suddenly very different endeavor, right? Which probably they didn't have any kind of schooling or any preparation or experience with.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there is some preparation, but like when you're doing it just like a couple months before, you actually have the kid, right? Which is oftentimes, I think people, they're like, oh, okay, now suddenly we have to like shift gears and suddenly become experts
Yeah.
in the span of a couple months. That's not really gonna, cut it,
Still
aside from like the
still
years of
working on
practice.
that, so
But it's just incredible. I think I have this feeling that like some people, they go into education and um the way your attitude is so important, right? Because you can see it as like, wow, look at all this great energy, and like look at this potential, and look how much fun this is, and look, and this and that. But then you can also see it on the flip side, right? More negative, and being like, this is terrible. I have no control.
Mhm.
This person said this,
Yeah.
and I just I want to get out.
Yeah.
And sometimes it actually is like the precursor for like, this is why I don't want to have
Yeah.
kids, because, but like what you said is like complete opposite. Like, what is that about? Like, is it just like your, yeah, like how do you explain that?
I think now, like, I think it's different when you're younger because, you have a lot more energy. I think now, if my wife were to come to me and be like, "Let's have a baby," I'd be like, "Let's get divorced." Because I don't have the energy for that anymore, you know what I mean? But I think being younger and having that, I can take on the world. I tend to bite off a lot more than I can chew. And like I said, I thrive best in chaos, I think. And I think that had a lot to do with it. We had a lot going on. I mean, our three youngest, they were boom, boom, boom. So Kate is 17, Aiden is 18, and Jace just turned 20. So they were like, what is it, Irish twins, I think. They were all like boom, boom, boom. We had three in diapers at one point in time. And I don't know how I survived that. That's nuts to look back on that. But I was in a classroom with, 20 or 32-year-olds all day, so, or 3-year-olds, so it didn't seem like a lot to me because I was so used to bigger numbers at home. Um, but yeah, I mean, going back, I was overwhelmed all the time with it. I just didn't. You just don't have any right. You can't think about it. You just got to keep going. So that's basically how parenthood, and that's how I got through it.
Nice. Yeah, you don't know just how much work it is until you've done it.
No, you don't.
It's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you supported so many, like not just your children, but like probably at this point hundreds and hundreds of little ones,
Hmm.
who have now probably grown and are off doing awesome things, and still probably figuring out a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
And um, you know, part of me wants to now like bring in this concept of global citizenship, and if it's something that in the work that you do
Hmm.
ever does come up in terms of, maybe is it preparation for the world? Is there alignment in terms of like what your understanding of being a global citizen is with the actual kind of, behaviors and that you see in the classroom, or the kind of, I don't know, the way in which you try to really get them to like connect with each other, building friendships. Yeah, I'm just, yeah. Is that something that has like been on your radar before, or is this something kind of like new in terms of the work that you do?
I think that we want to prepare good humans in our classrooms, right? So we want our kids to take away, these are the things that I need to do to be a good human in order to make the world a better place. And now we call that social emotional learning. Back in the day that didn't have a title, but now it's social emotional learning. We want to teach kids about their feelings, and we want to teach them it's okay to feel those things, but it's not okay to act out on our feelings sometimes. Like we have to learn some self-control at some point. So I think that comes into our classrooms daily, and not just with our kids, with us too, because if I come into the classroom and I've had a bad night and the kids they're off the rocker today, like it's loud and I'm overstimulated, I have to also be able to demonstrate to them I can keep myself under control as well. um so I think for me being a global citizen, I think it's demonstrative, you know what I mean? Like I want to
Mm.
be a ripple that's positive in their life, and I want them to go out and be the next ripple for somebody else. So I think every day coming into that classroom and being very self-aware, and helping them understand that I can have a bad day and you can have a bad day, but we don't have to clash and make our bad days worse. I think that's kind of where I was when I was in the classroom with the kids. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I really like what you said about you being the ripple
Hmm.
through your actions,
Yeah.
right? That affect, but then also saying, "Hey, you're going to be the next ripple."
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's really like beautiful imagery, really, when you think about it, because I think the idea is like continuity,
Yep.
right? Of like it doesn't stop,
Yeah.
right? When you have a stagnant, lake,
Yep.
that's when things get,
Mosquitoes.
I don't know, is it like some things fester? Mosquito. Yeah, the damn mosquitoes come out
The
and
mosquitoes.
no one wants them.
No.
So Yeah.
It's also being
Or I think, the word is like putrid, right?
yes, and it's also being able to demonstrate, like, listen, we're all human, right? So if I have a bad day and if they're acting out and I turn around and I yell at them, okay, so now I've got to take responsibility for that, and I've got to show them that I can be apologetic, I can make mistakes, and I can own those mistakes, and you can do that too. So we all have bad days, but it's how we own it that defines who we are.
Mm.
Not that mistake that we made, but how we own that mistake, I think, is what I want to teach them is the important lesson.
And I think that's an important lesson in global citizenship as well, right? Because another way of saying like taking that ownership is taking responsibility for our actions. And, when we look to the, social media landscape,
Hmm.
and just news media in general, there isn't much of that going on, if I'm being honest. And I don't think that's like a political cut on either side. It's like across the board,
Yeah.
no one wants to take responsibility for a lot of the bad stuff that's happening. Because again, many of these things that we're seeing have been compounding over years.
Hmm.
And and so when does the cycle end?
Yeah.
No one seems to be strong enough, right, to bear that brunt, or put themselves in such a vulnerable place
Mhm.
where suddenly now it's like their head on like the chopping block, and it's like again, these things have to be taught at a younger age, like what you were saying.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have, like, it would be unthinkable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Unconscionable for them to
That's
to do
well,
some of the things
and
that
that's
they're
not
doing.
something that we were taught as kids, you know what I mean? Like, we come from us Gen Xers, we weren't we didn't come from a generation of feel your feelings, and, we pick up and move on. That's what we came from. So this is a new skill that I've learned over the last, 5 years or so, is being accountable for myself, because we didn't learn that, and we didn't need to do that. Adults were kids should be seen and not heard. So we've learned all these terrible things from our parents, and that we're like, oh, well, that's what you do. And then we learn that that's not what you do. So now we have to be accountable for that. And so I think constantly being a lifelong learner is constantly picking up something that's new and being able to implement that somehow in your life. And being able to look at somebody and be like, listen, I recognize that you make mistakes, and thank you for your accountability. And being able to pick up and move on from that is, is something that I think we all need to practice constantly, especially in today's world.
Right. And in today's world, it's very easy to kind of like lose
Mhm.
track of where is this all heading towards, and is there hope, right? I think again, it's somewhat dire, and people are quite negative,
Yeah.
pessimistic about future outlook. um you work with very pure lumps of clay, aka kids. And so I'm just wondering, like, what gives you the most hope when you enter into a classroom? Like, is it? Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something specific, or yeah, I'm just curious, like, what gives you that hope that like actually the future can be different through the work and your efforts that you're doing today?
I think when I walk into a classroom and I see a parent who wants to do the work and who wants their kid to be something, I think it was Dr. Mapp when we were talking about coming into the classroom with families, and she said, you should always ask your families what they dream for their children. And I never thought about that until she had said that, because what does that really matter? I thought, but it does, because I can't do my work unless I know where it is that they're trying to go. So I think walking into a classroom and seeing families that want something more for their kids inspires me and gives me hope, because these little lumps of clay, they need something to form them and shape them, and we're not doing that work all on our own as teachers. I mean, they're going home to families who have the biggest input on who they are and who they're going to become. So I think that's my biggest hope, is seeing these families that definitely want more, and they want their kids to be that change that we're all desperately needing at this point. So I haven't completely given up hope. Not completely. Like
That's good.
70%.
That's good. I'm encouraged. Oh, dang, we're at 70% now. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I'm not saying there's not a bag in my car with Canada's plates on it, but that's neither here nor there.
Oh man, yeah, you've disclosed it. It's out there now. Um, we all know. The world knows, Alex.
I'm fine with
Tell us how you really feel, okay? So, I well, first shout out to Dr. Mapp. And there is something really powerful. Again, I think the word community comes to mind because this work is not just falling on the student,
Yep.
right, to become model citizen. It's not falling on the teacher to be best teacher of the century.
Mhm.
But it's also not to like put all responsibility on the parents to say, hey, get your stuff together. Come on, it's all on you. There's something about that the oh, I was about to say, is it trifecta? You have like the three different points, but like, they need to be working in tandem, but you also need to really get to know like the family and simply like, what are you hoping for them? Like, I think that is so powerful because
Mhm.
what parent doesn't have a dream for their child? And it could be something as simple as like, I just want my child to be happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good starting point. I think that's what all families should really be gearing towards rather than just I want them to go to Harvard or something.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Those are
okay,
those are the best answers though, because, that what that means whatever that kid finds that they're interested in or whatever it is that, tickles their little fancies and makes them light up at the end of the day, the parent's gonna be happy because they've found something there. Whereas you've got
mm,
families who are like, "Oh, I want my kid to go to Harvard." Like, it's this, but it's not.
mm,
I feel like kids that wanna be happy, it's a bigger ball of everything included in it, so I like that answer.
yeah, yeah. Well, even just your hand gestures said a lot because it's like either like attack or like
Yeah,
hitting,
yeah.
or it's like this
It's like
encompassing.
this is it's one pathway only, this is the only way to
Yeah,
success is this way. Whereas parents who just think about their kids being happy, I think there's a more there's a rounder approach to that than just one straight path.
yeah. There's so many paths, right? We just don't realize that because I think there's a lot of fear of that unknown of,
Yeah.
well, what is the path that my child's going to take? You don't know.
Yeah.
None of us know.
No.
We just have little inklings of it, like little breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
we just got to support them.
what works for us doesn't work for our kids all the time. You know what I mean? Like education's huge for me, and I've always geared myself towards learning something and being in a classroom. And that for some of my kids, my personal kids, like that's not the path that they've chosen, and that's okay. I mean, they'll find their way in their own time. I didn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was in my 40s, so I figure they've got time.
Mm,
But it's just I was one of those parents who was you graduate high school, you got to go to college, like you got to get an education, you got to be something. And by the time now that Cade's in high school and he's finishing up, I've learned that that's not necessarily it's not necessarily what's going to work for all of them. So see,
mm.
look, learning something every day, Scott.
Every day, every day to the very end.
Yeah,
I love that, and your love of learning, and like the fact that you stated that you love to read books. This brings us to the last question that I wanted to pose to you. Any book recommendations?
there's been so many good books I've read this year. Um, Book that probably changed my life in the way I think about things: The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Um, Phenomenal book. I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in a few hours. And I just read Mad Honey. I think that's Jodi Pickle. I think that book there was a twist at the end that I was like, so it was just a really good read. So those two books.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those recommendations. I'm gonna have to check it out myself. And yeah, just wanted to really emphasize how amazing this conversation has been. And it's I want to have more voices from the early childhood education field onto my podcast because it's just so critical the work that you do. And I love how you stepped into this space with such like humility and vulnerability. A little bit of sarcasm, but that's okay. But it's just like it's just wonderful to hear that you've really found your way. But at the same time, even before hitting that, you said like in your 40s, that's when you really knew what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, you were already like you already knew what you wanted to do, even in the smaller steps that led you to like that bigger realization or maybe the conviction,
Yep.
right? Because even the stumbling into like that initial like tutoring with like 2 year olds, I don't think was a coincidence.
Mm-mm.
And I think, you had enough wisdom to like perceive how powerful that was to just stick with it. And I think people don't realize even just deciding like if something feels true and sticking with it
Yeah.
is like 90% of the battle.
Absolutely.
So, so I really like applaud you in the work that you've done and that you continue to do, Alex. Because there's, I'm really excited about this school that you're building with all these fantastic young educators. I'd love to visit one day
Absolutely.
and hang out and yeah, just learn about that world even more. But yeah, just wanted to give you the last word as we kind of close out this awesome conversation. So, any final thoughts?
No, I just thank you for this conversation. It's really nice to always sit down with people who are like-minded and to have conversations about, the importance of what we do in our lives every day. So thank you very much for having me today. I appreciate it.